have no words. So that brings us to our next people. Would you just welcome me with love in your hearts for our magnificent and glorious and wonderful Greg and Angela Bender.
Hey. Thanks, Jess.
Hey.
Hi. I didn't know if we would have anyone here on Mother's Day evening, like that's such a thing. It's a thing. And so I'm super glad for us to be together and have this time together. What are you, babe?
I'm a businessman.
You're a businessman? You have a briefcase, a watch, a suit. You are a human. And a hat.
And boots.
And boots.
Oh, my boots.
Oh, your boots fell off? Nice. Nicely done, sir. You've created an outfit constructed of imagination and paper. I love it. I love it. Hi, babe.
Hi, sweetie.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
Yeah?
Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I called my mom, and I said, hi, Mom, and then we both went, Happy Mother's Day. Because apparently, even though I called her, if she tells me it first, she wins.
It's a competition.
Apparently, it's a competition of something.
My mom and
I. Of
I
the word dueling.
do not have this competition.
You do not have this competition. It does not
Never
happen.
once.
Never once. So we're going to take just a couple minutes and spend some time together. I'm kind of praying through our time, and I haven't talked to you about what you have thoughts with the Lord on prophetic or listening time, or if it had anything to do with moms, women, or anything like that. Do you know? Do you guys know? Jared, do you know? Do you have a?
We never know.
We never know. That's part of the adventure. So okay, so cool. So we're gonna play it by ear. I love it. I love our time. So we have been talking about kind of this season of stepping into understanding what it means to be creative and courageous, and the necessary part of processing and dealing with vulnerability and shame. And yeah, right? So before we jump into people kind of sharing what's going on, I wanted to take a moment with our kids, and we're going to do a little thing. So my niece just showed me, this is so cool, right, Darby? This is so cool. So my niece said, hey, we were just randomly sharing stuff. You know how people come to visit and then you randomly share things, right? Because you're trying to find something to talk about, because you've talked about all the stuff, and then you're trying to find other things. So she says, did you know, randomly, that things have DNA memory? And apparently, according to certain research, honey is one of the things that has DNA memory. Do you know this? Anybody know this except for maybe Carrie, who was here? Okay, so the way to know that you have real honey and you don't have some corn syrup substitute is if you put honey in a flat space, and you guys will be able to do this, and you guys can all come forward to one of the 3 locations. So just come forward and see.
Don't put your fingers in there yet. Just
Don't put your
hold
fingers
on.
in there yet. So the way that you can test it is I'll show you guys with this one, and then you guys can join one of the tables on the sides and do your own. So basically what you do is you take honey, and to find out if it's really authentic honey, it has memory within the honey. So you put cold water on top of honey and you start to just jiggle it. And you guys can see, you'll see for yourselves, but for you kids, as you start to jiggle it, it will start to take shape. And the shape will start to be, as you keep kind of going, right, in a honeycomb.
That's cool.
Yeah. So
Pretty phenomenal.
if you keep going, it'll perfectly shape into the honeycomb shape. So you can go to your tables and pour in cold water.
Give me it.
And continue to shake it. And I think I put mine a little too thick, because if you do it a little thinner, it will actually literally do all the hexagons. So I think mine's a little too thick. So go ahead and somebody can start shaking. You just kind of...
I would do it lightly.
And if it is a corn syrup / honey substitute, it will not. Oh, hey, look at you.
Well,
Isn't that so cool? Super fun, right?
And that looks like a heart.
So this is your guys's,
Ours became the Virgin Mary.
right?
It's because it's Mother's Day.
And the Virgin Mary she made honey, guys, just so you know.
The Virgin Mary on Mother's
Right? So I think I probably put mine a little too thick, so it's taking a little longer for it to get into its shapes. Okay, this is the best one. That's yeah.
Taylor did the best.
Taylor did the best one. Here. Here's this one.
that's wild.
I know, isn't it crazy?
I really don't think he says anything. You're genealogy.
So I don't know if it does have anything to do with genetic memory. I'm going to look up the research, but here's this one.
I think it has to do with the way that the water is going over it.
Well,
This one. May I see it?
I tried it with other honeys that are not raw honey, and they will not do this. They just stay in a glob.
They just
It just stays in a glob. But,
That's cool. I know what I'm doing when I go home tonight.
right, you're going to play with your
honey.
play with your honey.
Check all the honeys.
Water around and gravel, and we'll do different things.
We'll see. I don't know. I don't know if it's true. I haven't verified it, but I did try it with non-raw honey.
You don't know what ninja looks like? Yes, I do.
That's looking pretty cool. Okay, you guys can sit.
Go with it.
But Greg, if you would take,
this one's not real honey.
it's because I made it too thick, so it takes a really long time for it to sort out. But Greg, if you would take a marker, if you don't mind. I know. So I thought it was so fun. Are you looking it up right now? Oh, okay. I just thought you might be. I was supposed to. Oh, fun. That's fun. Yay. So when my niece was talking about this, I don't know what all the research is. I didn't want to wreck it for myself. I'm not going to look until this week about why it does this. I do know that rocks do this. I do know that molecules do this. They start to line up in certain ways magnetically. You know this as a scientist, right? And so I know that things tend to have this tendency to go back to these certain forms. Even like when I used to work for Shop NBC and HSN, we did a lot of different jewelry. They do things to gemstones. They can create gemstones. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but a man-made gemstone is identical to a nature-created gemstone because all you have to do is have the same ingredients and heat and pressure, and the molecules respond in the same ways as they would, in Earth. So they don't call them now natural and artificial gemstones. They call them synthetic because they were interfered with, but there isn't any such thing now as a natural gemstone because they're both gemstones. One's just created with human interference and the other is created by nature over a long period of time. So it's kind of an interesting thing that under certain conditions, right, molecules want to do certain things. And it reminded me of our definition of sin, which was, does anybody remember like just our most recent conversation about like a new idea on what the Hebrew understanding of sin was, which is much, much different than a couple thousand years later, what our Greek educated perspective of sin is. And does anybody remember what that was that we said? Yay.
Like acting out in a way that's other than your original self.
Yeah, it means not authentic. So it didn't actually have anything to do with like good or bad. The word sin itself meant not authentic. So when you start to layer that into the conversation, it wasn't about necessarily bad or good, it was meaning anything that is not authentic. And so I just loved like the honey, going, hey, you know what, like we want to naturally move back into our natural shape. our true self, right? Everything in us wants to embrace our true self. And we get talked out of it, we get taught out of it, we get conditioned out of it. But our self is always crying out inside of us. That's why we become so uncomfortable when we are not our true selves. In fact, there's a word that we can use to describe how we feel when we are not being our authentic self. And based on the series that we're in, does anybody want to guess what that is? The feeling you feel when you are not your authentic self. Did someone say it? Shame. Bing, bing, bing. Right? Thank you. Right? So,
Elsa in the first half of the movie, guys.
there you go. Shame. I know the gospel in Frozen. So good. So, we, I think, may release kids to go, but I'm wondering if, Christy, if you're, it's just, I think the Staufers are not here this week. So I was thinking maybe they could go have a great time with Miss Jasandra. Does that sound okay to you? Does that sound like a good plan? And because we're only going to be here like literally 20 minutes.
I'll bring a couple of the cups.
I think you could take all the cups.
Okay.
And you guys could have a stacking contest bonanza. Bonanza. What does bonanza even mean? Yeah, look it up. What does bonanza mean? Does anybody know? What? Is it a TV show? This is true. Michael Landon starred in Bonanza.
Bonanza, a situation or event that creates a sudden increase in wealth, good fortune, or profit.
Wait. Oh, hey, wait. That sounds so fun. Hang on. Okay, here you go. Bonanza.
A situation or event that creates a sudden increase in wealth, good fortune, or profits.
That's so fun. I want a bonanza. Let's have more bonanzas. Yeah, she'll read it again.
A situation or event that creates a sudden increase in wealth, good fortune, or profits.
So that's the genius of the Holy Spirit, interjecting a fun word and definition into our time today. Super fun. So our series is on courage and creativity. And last week we talked a little bit about how we felt about vulnerability. You're welcome to jump in on any of those subjects, but this week we're going to talk a little bit more about shame, which is the feeling that we get when we are not our authentic selves, or it can be the feeling we get when somebody tells us we are wrong. We might actually be being our authentic self, and somebody tells us you're wrong, or we have a judgment that we're wrong. So I want us to take a moment and just be silent with the Lord and process the concept for a moment of shame and ask Him what He has to say to us about that, and then we'll go from there. So, yay. Okay. Anybody want to share anything? As a little segue into this, I know I already shared this before, but not everybody maybe heard it in that moment, but I love what Brene Brown says. And of course, she's the one who, in our, at least, in modern times, has done the most research that I'm currently aware of on shame. And she said, when I'm on a plane and I want to talk to people and I'm open to having conversation, she goes, I tell people that I do research on creativity and courage. And she said, when I don't want to talk to people, I tell them that I study vulnerability and shame. They totally shut down. They're like, whoa, okay, I have a phone call to make. So funny. So anyway, want to jump in on your thoughts, feelings of, oh, sorry, I forgot to turn off my ringer, on shame and vulnerability. It's Meg and Rod Miller in Canada. I know. Yay, answer it.
Yeah, I bet you are calling for Angela.
Hi, Meg.
I know it's Meg. She's at church right now in front of everybody. Oh, God. Hold on, I'll let you talk to her. Here you
No,
go.
I really, for real, hi, Meg. Everyone says, they said answer it, so Greg did. Hang on, I'm putting you on speaker.
Do not put me on speaker. Just under the That's what she did.
Hi, Meg. We basically, I asked if anyone had any comments on shame. And you called in. On shame, yeah.
And I called. Fantastic. I don't have any comments on shame. But I'm so sorry I called you during church, and I will call you back later.
It's totally my fault because I left the ringer on, and then we answered. So we just love you, Meg. Happy Mother's
We
Day.
love you guys too. Here's Rod.
Hi, Rod.
It's shame that she called you during church.
We love you guys. Love you, love you. Okay, Lord, do you have anything for us with Rod and Meg, like that this happened? Do you guys have anything for us?
Do we have anything for them? No, but we love you guys, and we bless you, and I have nothing profound, but we do love you, so that's pretty profound.
Yeah. Is there anything more profound? We love you guys too. Does anyone have anything for Meg and Rod? Come visit, they said.
Yeah. All right.
And that was a yeah, and seconded. Okay, love you guys. I'll call you back later. Thank you for being awesome. Okay, bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Wow, I'm so proud of you, honey. Going rogue. Yeah. Yeah, that was creative. That was courageous. That was bold. Love you. I'm never more attracted to you than I am right now.
You're going to call during church, you're going to get on church. That's the deal we have here.
That's so fun. All right. Yeah, Christy has a comment on shame, and then Lindsay does too. And you pick where you're going first.
So the thought that came to my mind, which was interesting, was at our house in Prescott, we have kind of this archway as you walk up to the house, and we had this really annoying vine that would grow up it and over, and it would kind of grow under the eaves, and it was like initially like, oh, that could be pretty, like that could be a nice look, and then it just was really annoying because it would tear up the wood slats, and and then so you had to rip it out, and ripping it out was really hard. It wasn't just like pulling up a weed where you can grab the root or whatever. It was very difficult to rip. And then the thought came about in the movie, the Disney movie, I think it's Sleeping Beauty, and where the evil I haven't seen it in ages, but Maleficent, right? She's like in the Disney version, she's in her castle or whatever that is surrounded by thorns, right? Like these vines that have thorns all on them, and the prince has to come and hack through it, and her whole being in her castle was just protected by these vines full of thorns, and it was really hard. And like I just kept asking her, like, okay, well, how do you like stop it from growing, or how do you rip it out, or how? And I didn't get an answer, but that was just kind of the thought that I had, was this vine that just grows and kind of destroys and protects the whatever, the hurt or whatever from inside, and keeps the good out.
Interesting. That's so good. Thank you.
So I just heard that shame is the cheapest tool that the enemy has, because it takes so little.
So little effort.
It's so little because, and it's such a dark force because it uses things that are true in it and then distorts it. So it's just a really cheap, easy go-to. And in the kingdom, shame can't take a grip on people because love just comes in and overwhelms it. It can't grow.
Say that again.
In the kingdom, love just overwhelms it and takes it out.
Yeah.
So I guess the second part is that it's not, okay, now I'm perceiving something that I can't say again.
Okay, take a moment, that's fine.
Just a lot of people might think in order to combat shame in people that are under shame, you're going to want to deal with what's true. And that's not what combats shame. What combats shame is love. And that's what I'm that's what I'm feeling.
Okay, so my go-to when I feel shame is trying to go to facts. I keep trying to argue the facts. And it is super unsuccessful. Anybody with me on that? So that's so good, Lindsay. I know I'm writing on the board, babe. Overcome by love. So good. It must be Mother's Day. He'll be back next week.
It's the purple shirt.
It is, and you actually recommended it. Like you said, hey, should I wear the purple shirt? I was like, hey, if you want to wear the purple shirt, wear the purple shirt. You're on fire today. Okay.
Before you said that love comment, I wrote, love convinces us who we are, shame convinces us who we're not.
Oh, that's so good. Somebody else can start if they want to, but that is just awesome.
Why does it sometimes seem so much harder to believe than love who we really are rather than...
Hold on, go there. We are, we are not.
It's just the thought, like, why is it then sometimes seem harder to believe love, which is who we are, versus the shame of who we're not? Why does it sometimes seem easier to believe the shame and what is not truly us?
Anybody have a comment on that? I have a comment, but I'll go to you guys first.
Listen to shame to find out what you really
Right? Listen to shame and find out what you really are. Right? Right. Shame can. Right? It's so good. Shame can be useful, can be helped.
flip shame on its head.
Flip shame on its head. Oh, wouldn't that be a nice turn of events? I had a mentor, had a mentor who described, like, that's the earth, just in case you wanted to know. I'm sure you knew that right away. So, you know, if we were doing charades, I'm sure that would have taken a split second for you to figure that out. And she described, some of you may have heard me talk about this, that she feels like around the earth is this, like an erector set. You know the erector set with the little, well, some of you do. Greg knows. Like, picture these are like those little bars with the little screws and the nuts, right? Thank you, Adrian. Do you know an erector set? You too young. Well, this is not a good example of an erector set, but
That's a horrible example of a erector set.
I know. They're little metal pieces with little screws and nuts, and you could like build all kinds of things.
Cranes and skyscrapers and...
Yeah. So you can Google it and look it up, and it'll show you pictures of erector sets. But you could erect entire structures, like out of these little pieces, little tiny pieces. And she said she felt like our earth was covered with a veil, that's scriptural, and that the veil was held in place, that the like nuts that hold all of the erector set pieces in place within the atmosphere of our world was shame. That it was shame that kept us veiled from our true selves, shame that keeps us veiled from who God really is, because it's what holds all the structure in place. Really, she said sin, which keeps us running around trying to solve things that are unsolvable, running around trying to shore up or fit, right? Performing, whatnot. So interesting. And that if we wanted to undo the structure that was locking things in our lives, that we could undo it by unscrewing shame and addressing shame. And how does it stay in place? Because none of us want to touch it. So why is it easier? I think that there is an atmosphere almost of shame. And I think that there's a huge atmosphere of shame within the church, which is to embrace that we're nothing, right? To embrace that we're worms. There's even entire worship songs. There's, thank you, Lord, that you are good when there's nothing good in me. We have embraced an entire culture that is based on my entire relationship with a good God is based on my unworthiness and my lack of goodness. And so even in the very place where we should have like the floodgates open to goodness and shame should fall away, it's actually even, I think, sometimes locked down tighter. And remember we talked about in our first session on the series, we talked about the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is when I tell you, or you come to me and tell me something and I say, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, would you forgive me? That's guilt. I made a mistake. I was wrong. That's guilt. Shame is, I am wrong. Right? I am wrong. Not I did something wrong, I am wrong. And it's really interesting, I was talking with a really cool friend yesterday, and she said multiple times to me, I'm just afraid that if I do ... I'm just not a good person. I'm not a good daughter, I'm not a good this. And it triggered in my mind that same conversation, right? About the difference between, hey, if I do this, I might be making a mistake, is a completely different conversation than if I do this, I might be bad. And we aren't even aware of the subconscious decision we make on all of this all the time. So, anybody else have another comment?
For some reason, I keep thinking about the concept of a mirror, like we see in ourselves in a mirror, and how often we look to people to see if they're pleased, to know if we are good or not good, right? And I was thinking about how I was like, okay, so why does that happen? And when a newborn baby is born, I mean, when they come into the world, they look in their parents' face, parents look at their face, and the parent gives meaning to the child's experience by the way that the parent reflects back to the child, right?
Yeah.
So we learn from a very early age to look outside of ourselves for meaning about what is going on inside of ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, okay, so how did that get usurped? We were supposed to be looking outside of ourselves because God made us to do that. So, we look outside of ourselves. I mean, it seems very obvious. You look to the Lord somehow. You learn how to look into God's face for that affirmation, but instead we've looked to other things, and it's caused a sense of shame. You begin to not know who you are.
That twisted reflection, instead of it being a divine connection with our true selves and a divine connection with who we really are with each other, has become twisted.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that whole thing of wanting to please, wanting to be pleasing, has now become something that actually makes us so that we don't even know who we are anymore.
So good. So good. So Darby was watching Brain Games this week. Anybody love? Right. And Darby, remember that section I was like walking through and I was like, back up, come sit down on the couch, right? Remember that? So what they did was an experiment, maybe you guys have watched this episode, where they had a waiter or waitress or bartender treat someone super rudely when they ordered a drink. Anybody seen that particular? Have you seen that one? It was so, right? So good. And so, and then anyone want to describe what happened in people's brains when they were treated badly? Okay, go ahead. If you remember, I mean, it's like so much cool stuff in those shows.
Yeah, I think it was like she kept bringing them the wrong drink and then charging them a lot for it.
Yeah, $60-some for a Coke.
Yeah, and so she walked away for a second to get the manager, and the guy like walked out like annoyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's totally the episode. You're totally right. She was bringing the wrong drink, being super rude, then charging this exorbitant a price for the drink, and they're like, how can this be this much money? And they're like, that's how much it is, and I have to pay for it if you don't pay for it. So the experiment was, and this is really interesting, what happens in the brain when you start to experience a sense of rudeness or injustice in terms of who you are. And here's what happens. At a subconscious level, your brain starts to set off an alarm. And it starts to perceive everything. It starts to like focus on that issue. So instead of like going away from the bar, going and doing what they were going to do, they started to fixate on solving and fixing this issue. And it made me realize that when we sense danger, and danger is like anything that could be, like when this stuff starts to get rattled, when our protection, our sense of self or whatever starts to get rattled, our brain sets off an alarm that literally causes us to start fixating on the flaws of others in order to kind of like make our world turn upright back again. So we're not even aware that we are doing this with other people and they're doing it with us. Anybody ever like now is going, oh, I have actually experienced that, but didn't really realize that was happening, right? So you start to, when somebody is doing something that causes you to feel unsettled, your brain will start to tell you danger. You interpret that as, I'm now going to start to become hypercritical of that person. Isn't that like so cool? Okay, so the Lord's just going to talk to us about that this week. Like, this is our time. This is the subject I felt like He wanted to bring up, and I'm just going to close us out with like it's kind of super interesting, right? So, make sure you keep your journal. We all got journals this year. Keep your journal around. Have it in the car. Write down your thoughts and comments because I think this is the thing that God's wanting to unfold and expose for us. But here's a really beautiful thing. I was hiking this week, and you know how God meets me on the mountain, right? It's just so, I just love it. I'm so grateful. And so I'm hiking, and I get to the top of it, and normally as soon as I get to the top, I turn around. But there was a couple up there, and they were trying to like take a picture of one or the other, and I said, I did what you would never do. Well, maybe you're a new man. Like, I don't know. Tell me what I did and what you would do.
Well, I'm wearing a purple shirt.
Yeah.
I would have offered, of course, to take their photo for them.
I am so proud of you. Again, never
For
more,
free.
Yes, for free. Never been more attracted than I am right now to you. So I offered to take their photo for them, and they were like, sure. And then we ended up walking down at the same time, and I'm trying not to like be in their space, but there's people talking behind us, and people, so there's like a lot of traffic on the mountain at that point in time. So I'm kind of stuck walking down with these people. By the time we get down to the bottom of the mountain, yeah, we're so good. We're like this. So he, partway down the mountain, says, well, what, of course, faith stuff comes up, God stuff comes up, church stuff comes up, and he's like, well, where do you go to church? And I'm like, well, my husband and I kind of planted this little tiny community of people who are adventurers, and he's like, what's the name of it? And he goes, that's a great name. By the way, nobody's ever actually said that to me before, so that all alone was like super affirming to me. And he says, that is an outpouring in the desert. And for the next 20 minutes, out tumbles all of these incredible affirmations for our community, for me personally. He brought up, I believe that you've been under a lot of accusations. And he said, and here's what I feel like the Lord wants to say to that. And it was just so, I know, right? I know. Well, I have them in my phone, both he and his wife. Yeah, right? And so by the time we got down to the bottom, I'm like, would you lay hands on me? and
They're not actually in the phone.
No, they're not actually. They're in my phone, but not actually. I
just want you to know this.
Just their names and their phone numbers are digital. They're in the phone. Okay, I'm so embarrassed. So, anywho, contact information, I'll send it out. Anyway, super. He says to me, he goes, well, I'm super encouraged. He goes, because I felt like I've been in a dry season, and so then the Lord wanted to give him a word back, and so it was just a beautiful exchange. But it was so fun to have someone who totally didn't know me, right, start to speak all of these things that completely started to speak to these places of shame. And it doesn't remove my responsibility for growth. It doesn't remove my responsibility or opportunity to change and become bigger and stronger and greater in what God's doing. But it does remove and start to really hit at so that there's room for negative experiences to